So it is Miss Farmer, and instead of finding a video to do this process, I thought I would make one for myself. So one of the things that you learned in algebra that are super important is how to move something from standard form to slope-intercept form. And if you remember, let me get my pen. If you remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. But in this case, it's like y and then an inequality. It could be any of these, mx plus b. So that's the only difference. So obviously what we have here is y is not by itself, and it should be. So he's going to stay right there. Now what we need to do is get y alone. So the thing that is bothering him on his side of the equation is this 13x. So in order to get rid of the 13x, we have to do the inverse, which is minus 13x. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So these inequalities work just like equal signs. They're the halfway, or they split it down the middle. On the left-hand side, these canceled out, and all we have is y. Perfect. We have our inequality, and then we have 9 minus 13x. And the reason why I didn't combine them is because the 9 doesn't have a variable and the 13 does. So because they are not like terms, we can't combine them. So now what we should look at here is what is different. Why doesn't this still look in y equals mx plus b? It's because the mx, this is your slope and this is your x value. Well, they are over here. They're on the right-hand side, and then your y-intercept or your b is actually in the wrong place. So all we can do is just flip them around. So I don't have to touch this y. He stays. Inequality. And then do not forget that minus sign. That is a minus 13x, so minus 13x. And it is a positive 9. Your final answer would be y is less than negative 13x plus 9. I apologize for the handwriting ahead of time. All right, so let's do another one. This one's a little bit trickier because in this case, the y is negative, okay? Now, if something, if you struggle to remember that when you have a negative sign in front of a variable, that is a -1, then you can just write the -1. That's perfectly fine. Sometimes it just helps you remember that there is still a -1 being multiplied to it. Okay, so we have to do the same thing here, and we're still dealing actually with 13x. So I'm going to subtract 13x from each side. Now, when you bring stuff down, this is the halfway point. When you bring stuff down, that negative sign needs to go with it. Do not forget. There's that little -1y less than. And now we have -18 minus 13x. Now again, these are not in the same order. Remember that x has to be first. But if you can either do this on your own when you do this or make it a second step. It's either way works for you. So we have -1y. I am just going to flip those. So I'm going to have -13x minus 18. I just flipped the two. That's all I did. Okay, so we still have this -1 being multiplied to the y. And this is kind of why instead of just a negative sign bringing down, sometimes I remember to bring down a 1. It just reminds me what is happening. So that is -1 times y. So when at the end, you actually have to do the inverse, which the inverse of multiplying by -1 is dividing. So I have to divide every single thing by -1. This is the same process with inequalities or equal signs. So when you have this situation, you just have to divide everything by -1. Okay. So the rule of thumb, there is a rule here, and sometimes whenever I divide or multiply by a negative, I put stars. It just reminds me, if you multiply or divide by a negative number, you have to flip your symbol. So it was this, I flipped it. So you can flip it ahead of time. If you multiply or divide by a negative number, you have to flip your symbol. So these cancel, and we have y. And then negative 13 divided by negative 1 is positive 13. Negative 18 divided by negative 1 is positive 18. It just changes the sign of everything. And so this is your final answer. And once it's in this form, it'll allow you to graph. Okay, let's do another one. In this situation, y is negative again, so if it helps, put the 1. You don't have to put the 1 if you can remember, but if it helps, you can put the 1. All right, so we have this 17x minus 17x minus 17x. Okay, I'm going to bring down that negative 1y. And then I am going to skip this step. Instead of writing negative 10 minus 17x, I'm putting the x first. I just skipped this step. You are more than welcome to write negative 10 minus 17x first and then flip it. All right. So I need to divide by negative 1. And I'm telling you, I make stars. I let myself know, oh, I flip the symbol first before I forget. I'm like, okay, I got to flip the symbol. Now that I'm dividing by negative, I got to flip the symbol. And so these cancel, and I have y. Negative 17 divided by negative 1. Divided by negative 1 is positive 17. And negative 10 divided by negative 1 is positive 10. So this is my final answer, and I can graph it. Let's do another one. If you feel comfortable at this point, you don't even have to keep watching. I just wanted to do as many examples as I can for you. All right, so this one, we still need to get y by itself. And we're lucky, so y is not negative, so we're probably not going to have to flip the symbol at all. I like ones like that. So subtract 2x. Y is greater than. Now, again, you can write negative 15 minus 2x and then do another step and flip it however you want, just as long as you kind of keep that mx plus b in your head. That's what it's supposed to look like. Super easy. All right, last example. This one, again, whenever I tell myself, oh, okay, y is not negative, so that's cool. I don't have to flip this symbol or stress about that rule. So let's just go ahead and straight up solve it. I have to move the x, minus 15x, minus 15x. Bring down the 4y. It's greater than. I am going to skip the step, minus 15x minus 20. Then you have to divide, because 4 is currently being multiplied, so you have to divide every single thing by 4. We're dividing by a positive number. I don't have to flip the symbol, which is perfect. Negative 15 divided by 4. If we can't simplify it at all, then just leave it. We can't simplify that to a smaller fraction, and they don't want a decimal because that's a slope. So we have negative 15 over 4x. Negative 20 divided by 4 is negative 5. Alrighty. So that is the video. You can go back, you can watch examples, but I wanted you guys to get practice on this because putting it into slope-intercept form, you're going to need in order to graph an inequality, in order to graph a line, and a lot of times they're going to give it to you in this form, expect you to do this, and then graph it. And they do this with negative y's more often than you think. But if you just remember the rule, if you're multiplying or dividing by a negative number, you have to flip the symbol. So, and you could think about that at the very beginning. If you have a negative y, you're probably flipping the symbol.